7 of Preps to Pros. I'm Cooper Petagna alongside Andrews Ivins, and we have a great show for you today. Week 7 full of a lot of things going on in college football, including Rocky Top Tennessee getting their first win against Alabama for the first time in 15 years. But first, we're going to start recapping some commitments from over the weekend. Mississippi State, Georgia, Notre Dame all getting on the board. And then we'll talk about Tennessee with an eye on the future. We'll talk about the running backs in the Big Ten, so much production there, and who are some of the names to look out for in the future. We'll also talk about the Sunshine State. Florida, Miami, Florida State, all kind of struggling right now, so we'll take a look at them, and then we'll get into the freshman impact and end on a 2-minute drill. And Drew, a lot going on in college football, my friend, and I know you spent the weekend watching a lot of high school football. Tell me about that.
Yeah, man, I think I got the flu. You were joking about it and saying you felt sick. Next thing you know, I had a fever over 100 degrees for like 3 days. So I watched a lot of high school football. I watched a lot of college football. I watched a lot of NFL football. So it was a productive weekend, except I couldn't move off my couch.
The perfect remedy. The Oyster Boyz, even though they're a couple hundred miles away, still feeling the same symptoms. But Drew, let's get right into it. And on this show a couple weeks ago, you kind of slipped in some news to keep an eye on. And I'm not sure if our casual viewers were really anticipating this, but Top 247 athlete Creed Whitmore, who's been committed to the Florida Gators for quite some time, decommits and flips to Mike Leach in the Pirate at Mississippi State. Drew, this is a pretty big get for Mississippi State. You've been around Whitmore for pretty much his entire recruitment. What does this mean for both sides?
I think it's huge, and this is going to fly under the national radar, and that's fine because when you put on the tape, all you see is Creed Whitmore playing quarterback. I'm fortunate enough to have seen this kid play wide receiver multiple times. And I go back to Florida's Friday Night Lights camp 2 years ago when Evan Stewart was there. You had Jet Lee there, a bunch of different guys. And Creed Whitmore was just as productive as that group. Now, am I saying he's the next Evan Stewart? No. But this is a guy that I think can go into the SEC, be an inside receiver, and produce. I compare him to Slade Bolden, the former Alabama wide receiver who is now with the Baltimore Ravens. But to me, when we think about Mississippi State and what Mike Leach wants to do, obviously they're running the ball very well here in 2022. But at the end of the day, they want to throw the football, and I think Creed Whitmore, he has what it takes to be a go-to target for Elite 11 quarterback Chris Parson, who was previously committed to Florida State. So not a lot of people are talking about this addition, but Creed Whitmore is someone I thought that could produce at Florida. I expect him to do the same at Mississippi State.
I love that comparison of Slade Bolden, and certainly Mississippi State fans have been used to the production of a guy like Austin Williams too. Now, maybe not comparable in terms of their game, but in terms of what they offer, I think you said it, Drew, in terms of the versatility that Creed Whitmore adds. He can play outside in. I expect him to get on the field early, especially in that slot role as an inside receiver. I think you'll see him in the return game as well. He's too good of an athlete, a sub 1,100 meter guy, a guy that plays quarterback. You see him a lot as a runner as well, one of the more dynamic athletes in the class. And I thought it was a really good get for the Florida Gators. Drew, I think this stings a little bit for Florida, a lot more than maybe people are talking about.
Yeah, I mean, Creed's brother, Trent, is a wide receiver there, and you just kind of read Swamp 247, some of the other stuff on social media. They're expecting Trent to potentially enter the transfer portal. To me, this is kind of a bump in the road for the Gators. Again, I think Creed, they would like him to have signed with UF, the hometown school, and Buchholz, which is where Creed plays quarterback, and Creed's father is the head coach. So they got 2 defensive linemen that the Gators want. One of them's already committed, Gavin Hill. Kendall Jackson's a big-time talent in the class of 2024 that Florida has already circled. So I do think this is a bump for Florida, who, by all accounts, I mean, kind of ran off the field by LSU on Saturday night, losing by 10 points, giving up almost 600 yards of offense to the Tigers. So a ding in the armor. But if you're Florida, remember, you also got some other receivers committed. Eugene Wilson, who we've talked about at length, Aiden Mizell. So I don't think it's time to panic just yet. But it's never good when you're losing a guy just, a few hours after you lose to an SEC rival.
All right, Andrew, let's stick in the SEC East, and this time in the 2024 cycle. But Georgia already landing their quarterback for this cycle, and that is Ryan Puglisi out of the state of Connecticut. And Drew, this one kind of came on our radar yesterday within the last 24 hours. Georgia had seemed to kind of be in the quarterback market heavily in 2024 with some of the top names. They end up going with and pulling the trigger on Ryan Puglisi. What have you seen about him that makes you think this is a really good fit in Athens?
This is Todd Monken's guy. Todd saw Ryan throw back during the spring evaluation period. Ryan then comes up to Athens and he throws for that entire staff. And you talk to Rusty Manziel at Dogs247, Kip Adams. They kept bringing up Ryan's name as someone that UGA really liked. And they took this kid over Jaden Davis, Julian Sayin. So while he might have a 3-star grade next to his name, Todd Monken, Kirby Smart, they think they can win with Ryan at some point down the line. And I'll say this, Cooper, the state of Connecticut, kind of churning out quarterbacks as of late. You got Will Levis, Tyler Van Dyke. I mean, when I put on the tape, I see a guy that can move in the pocket. He can let that ball get to the deep third of the field. He's rather accurate on the move. Coop, I know you've seen some of him as well. Just your initial takeaways on this get for UGA.
He's sturdy, 6'2.5", 200 pounds, and I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to have to be asked to play early, but I think physically he'll be ready to play. And I say that because he has a very explosive arm, dynamic in that area. He's a pocket passer. I don't think this is going to be a guy that you'll lean on him in terms of his legs, but I think in terms of what he needs to develop at the next level, it's just kind of slowing down, be able to process, play with a little bit more touch, be able to change speeds and his velocity. But in terms of the pure arm talent, it's there. You certainly understand why Todd Monken, Kirby Smart gave Puglisi the green light and committed early and took his commitment. And this is a guy that I think fits what Georgia wants to do. They're going to be a team that is going to have an offensive line that can move people. They're going to have a strong running game, and you need to have a quarterback that can play within the parameters and be very efficient in the passing game and take care of the football. So I think that's what Ryan Puglisi does, and I think it's an excellent fit for the Georgia Bulldogs. But Drew, we're going to go outside of the SEC as we wrap up this, I would say, miniature commitment recap from over the weekend. Even though Notre Dame coming off a tough loss to Stanford this weekend, they got some good news before that, and that's from Top247 running back or athlete with the designation, and Jeremiah Love out of Missouri. And Drew, there's a lot to like with this guy, a sub 1,100 meter a running back out of Missouri, 10.76. He's got a verified 4.48. Speed is really the name of the game with him, but you turn on the film this year, a lot more physicality, showing the ability to play between the tackles, and you can also flex him out, and he's got some natural instincts as a receiver in the passing game. So I really like this get for Marcus Freeman in Notre Dame. You add that to Dylan Edwards out of Kansas, a guy that's super multiple, and Jaden Lamar out of the state of Washington. Drew, I like what Notre Dame's got coming into their backfield.
And I agree. And it's a tailback by committee approach. I mean, I think that's the name of the game right now in modern college football. Sure, we see some schools, and we're actually going to talk about a few here. We talk about Big Ten running backs in a little bit, but you got to have guys that have multiple skill sets, and you also got to have multiple running backs. I mean, how many big time ball carriers have we seen go down with injuries this season? Florida State's dealt with some, Miami, they've dealt with some. So you need to keep stacking that room. And I think the addition of Love is a good one. You brought up the speed markers, 10.76, 4.4, 8 in the 40-yard dash. No, nice get for Notre Dame, even though it was a disappointing weekend on the field for the Irish.
Well, we're going to talk a lot more Notre Dame a little bit later in this show. But, Drew, this weekend was about one team and one team only. Everybody added circle, number 6 versus number 3. It's been a long drought, 15 years since Tennessee has beat Alabama. That streak came to an end this weekend, and what a scene it was on Rocky Top. But, Drew, we're going to take a look to the future. Josh Heupel has this thing rolling right now, and on top of an undefeated team who is looks destined to compete for an SEC title this season. This is also a program that ranks in the top 10 in the country in the 24/7 Sports Composite Team rankings. And Drew, I know me and you know there's a lot to like. So the big question here, can Josh Heupel in Tennessee sustain this level of success going forward?
I think so, Cooper. I mean, we highlighted Tennessee as one of our teams of the week in the past. We've talked at length about what they're trying to do on the defensive side of the ball and how that two deep should only get better based on what they took last cycle and what they have committed this cycle. And then on top of all that, I think the quarterback picture sets up perfectly for Tennessee, right? Hendon Hooker, he's eventually going to be gone. But then you have Joe Milton right there. That's a nice bridge guy before you have Nico Iamaleava. And I saw Nico play on Friday night. I watched that game. It was on Valley Sports. Our colleague, Greg Biggins, was on the call. We got a chance to see him play. My takeaway was, man, he's a perfect fit for what Heupel wants to do on offense. He's got a quick release. He can spray that football around, and he can operate out of this wide open attack, which is exactly what Hendon Hooker is doing at UT under Alex Galesh. My big thing is, can they hold on to Galesh, the offensive coordinator? I'm surprised his name has not been linked to more openings here at both the Power 5 and the Group of 5 level. But to answer your question, can they sustain this? I think so. I think it's a quarterback-friendly offense. It's a wide receiver-friendly offense. And this win is going to do wonders for them on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, I think it starts with the trigger man. You mentioned Joe Milton, the former Michigan transfer, now at Tennessee in Knoxville. But it starts and ends this question with Nico Iamaleava. And I think they have the perfect trigger man for this offense. And I think Josh Heupel is certainly a guy that's going to get Nico Iamaleava ready to play sooner rather than later. I think this is a guy that can come in and almost play immediately in Tennessee. So I really like this transition, the future outlook of the Tennessee program. And then this offense on top of it, one of the top scoring offenses in all of college football for receivers and the prospects of receivers at skill positions, whether that be receiver, running back, or tight end. This is a very fun and open offense to play in. I think Tennessee is going to continue to see the benefit of that on the recruiting trail. So I like not only the outlook of this season for Tennessee and where they're sitting, but the future outlook as well. And I'll say this, Drew, Josh Heupel, first year 7-6. This was a guy that I think it was fair to question his recruiting chops coming from Central Florida to Tennessee. I think he's done a remarkable job there. But in terms of the culture at a place like Tennessee, who has really struggled with alignment from the top down, the job that he's been able to do off the field as well, I don't think gets enough credit as it probably deserves.
Absolutely, Cooper. I mean, 18 months ago, this was a program that was in shambles. I mean, we were wondering, are they going to get some type of major penalty or sanctions? It seemed like Heupel was just the only person that would take the job. I mean, no one anticipated him to be the guy that's going to make the third Saturday in October that much fun again, to the point where we have cigar smoke pouring out of Neyland Stadium. We got goalposts in the Tennessee River. It's wild. And again, I think it's going to help them on the recruiting front. It's going to make it that much easier for Josh Heupel. You get a Nico in, and sure, collectives and NIL, all that stuff's part of it. But Tennessee has their ducks in order with that. Now they're winning on the field. We see what this 2023 recruiting class looks like. We'll see what it looks like in 2024. And one more thing I want to point out, Cooper, we said it on Wednesday last week that we thought Tennessee would get a bump. Carnell Tate didn't make it in for his official visit, but he was tweeting about that game. He made sure to point out that Jalen Hyatt caught 6 passes, five of which went for touchdowns. So when you play in a game like that, everyone is watching. The 5-star recruits are watching, and I think that's only going to help Tennessee moving forward.
Have video game numbers there. A couple more points on Tennessee, Drew, and you continue to bring this up. With the territory that comes with success, you mentioned offensive coordinator Alex Galesh, who is a name that you have brought up a number of times as a guy that should be getting more consideration when it comes to maybe being a legitimate Group of 5 or Power 5 head coaching candidate. This is a guy working very closely with Josh Heupel on the offensive end, was hired by Josh Heupel in 2020 to be his co-OC and tight ends coach at Central Florida. Drew, your outlook on Alex Galesh, because, I have some feelings on this as well in terms of what's the best pathway forward for him.
I would think going the group of five route would probably make the most sense. I mean, he was a recruiting coordinator previously at Iowa State. He's actually born in Russia, which I think is by far the most crazy, unique nugget in that bio. And then we've also found out that he not only is calling plays this season, but he also called them last season. So I think if I'm him, I'm trying to go to a USF, some type of level like that, which is invested in it, and they want to score points on offense. But I just think he is such an attractive candidate because he's worked in Florida. He's worked under Matt Campbell. Now he's attached to one of the top offensive operations in all of college football. So we'll see. But to me, I think the most sense for him would be go the group of five route and then parlay that into a Power 5 job.
I'd like to see him be patient and stay and choose the job that fits him the most. I know how difficult that is in today's age, and how rare these opportunities are to be a head coach in college football, especially at this level. But you talk about Tennessee's brand right now, just ascending. I mean, a year ago they were 7-6. Now they're sitting in this position right now, 7-0, beating Alabama at home for the first time in 15 years. So you talk about him being able to improve his stock. I think you look at guys like Dan Lanning, who spent a number of years under Kirby Smart at the University of Georgia. I think there's other guys that you can look to. You mentioned Jeff Scott at Clemson, a lot of time there under Dabo Swinney. I think he can afford to be patient for what job he wants to choose. And I think the fact that he's an offensive-minded guy is going to aid him in terms of what job he can be selective with. So I really like the prospect of him. I think Tennessee is only going to improve. I think their talent acquisition is getting better. And you got a guy who is a program changer like Nico Iamaleava. Over the next 3 to 4 years, the outlook of Tennessee is one of the best and healthiest in the SEC. So I think he's in a win-win situation. If it's the right opportunity, I say go. If it isn't, I think he can afford to be patient. But Drew, let's go to the defensive side of the football. We don't talk about a lot because Tennessee's scoring so many points, and that's obviously a very fun topic to talk about. But on the defensive side, Drew, you brought up the fact that you really like what Tennessee is building in regards to their two deep and some of the talent that they have coming in this 2023 class. What are some of the parts that the Vols have on the way to Knoxville that gets you excited about their outlook?
How about Shadavian Bradley, the edge rusher? Cooper, we saw him at the Under Armour Future 50 event. I think if you put on his senior highlight tapes, I'm going to use the word, Cooper, they're pretty dang intriguing. I mean, this is a big, long, lengthy pass rusher. I believe Alan True, our colleague who covers the Midwest, has compared him to Greg Russo of the Buffalo Bills, the former Miami standout. And I'll be honest, the first time I read that comparison, I was like, I don't know if I see it. And then when I go back and watch, align that with the senior stuff, it starts coming together and clicking. But I think he's a big, long defensive lineman that can be molded into a variety of different things. And when I look at that defensive line room for what the Volunteers have built out, it's a bunch of different parts and pieces, and they're all different sizes. And I think that's kind of what you need to do if you're going to be effective there in the SEC. I'll also say this, they had two monster visitors over the weekend, Davion Hobbs, Tomarion Parker, both those guys in on unofficial visits. Those are uncommitted top 247 defensive linemen. They also had Samuel Mpemba, the borderline 5-star edge rusher out of IMG Academy. He was also there. So they're doing the right things. They got the potential franchise quarterback committed. Now they're investing some draft capital at the other key position, and that would be on the defensive line, because you also got to stop the other team's quarterback if you want to win games in the SEC.
And I know the irony of saying this, but it's Alabama-esque in terms of the potential defensively for the guys that they are targeting right now. I love the combination of Shadavian Bradley out of Missouri. You also have Caleb Herring in state, another long and versatile pass rusher. But Drew, you mentioned two names right there on campus this past weekend. If they can reel in just one of those guys, David Hobbs is a guy for us that we think is a potential 5-star pass rusher from the state of North Carolina. He is just scratching the surface. And geographically, these are the areas Tennessee needs to win in. And Tomarion Parker out of the state of Alabama as well. It sounds right now that Tennessee's in good shape for both of those guys. We'll keep a close eye on that. That completely changes the dynamic of this class for Josh Heupel, especially when we know how capable they are offensively, but you start being able to integrate some of those playmakers on the defensive end, I think that gives Tennessee a very different holistic outlook in terms of their future. So Tennessee rolling right now. What a great time to be a Vols fan. I know all those guys in Rocky Top are enjoying it. Tennessee getting it done. And before we transition to our next segment, remember to subscribe to the 247 Sports YouTube channel. Make sure to leave a like and a comment as well. We hope you're enjoying Preps to Pros as we inch forward to episode number 30. Drew and I are enjoying it ourselves. But Drew, you kind of scripted this show. I was busy this weekend with just a wedding retreat, private information. But anyway, let's get to it. Big Ten running backs. You wanted to talk about this because there's a lot of production there. You mentioned some of the names: Chase Brown out of Illinois, Donovan Edwards out of Michigan, Blake Corum as well, the two-headed monster there in Ann Arbor. You got Mo Ibrahim out of Minnesota, Braylon Allen in Wisconsin, so on and so forth. There are a lot of names in this Big Ten conversation at the running back position, and this is a league that historically breeds running backs that play on Sundays. So, Drew, a nice little exercise for us. This is something that you wanted to talk about. But Big Ten running back commits, maybe the guys that you could see filling some of these names on this graphic shoes. And, Drew, I want to start with a guy out of East Lansing or heading to East Lansing. He's going to play his ball at Michigan State for Mel Tucker in a new addition to the top 247, but that's Kedrick Riscano out of the state of Texas. And Drew, I like this guy a lot. To me, he spells Big Ten when you watch him. He's a big physical back, downhill runner, likes to play between the tackles. That's really where he excels. Great patience, really good vision. He's got a really good feel for the game. I like this guy, and I think he's going to be a really good fit for that style of football up north.
I just think when you're watching the Big Ten these days, it's kind of amazing how this is the one conference where everyone still is going to try to get their running back 20 carries, and they're going to hope that guy gets over the 120-yard mark. I think that's a great one, Cooper. I wrote down some other names of just kind of future Big Ten ball carriers to know. Kedrick Riscano, obviously, him heading to East Lansing. We know what they did with Kenneth Walker just recently. The first one for me, Mark Fletcher, who is headed to Ohio State. And when you think about Ohio State, they throw it around a bunch. But I think Mark Fletcher, I say he's a little baby Derrick Henry. And I hate to use that comparison, but for the average casual fan, if you saw Mark Fletcher play and his run style, he's just like Derrick Henry, King Henry. He's a big upright runner. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he's going to power through people. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do in the Big Ten one day. Another guy, Cole Cabana, Michigan commit. We just saw what those two Michigan running backs did to Penn State in a monster performance with Cole. The thing I like about him, just with Mark Fletcher, he can catch the ball out of the backfield, but he's a shifty runner that's probably more powerful than people would think. I mean, he's only listed at 180 pounds. I think he could probably get up to 195 pounds, but this guy has good vision, hits the hole hard, and I could see him in the maize and blue making an impact just like those other two. Final one, a bit of a guy that's off the radar, but that's what I think the Big Ten is all about. I mean, you get these running backs at different spots, and you're like, how are they so productive? Kewan Brown, Purdue commit out of the Atlanta area. Cooper, this guy is averaging 11.5 yards per carry as a senior. That's impressive. But how about he's averaging 228.7 yards a game as a senior? He's already rushed for 1,600 and 18 touchdowns. I think he's someone that's going to be awesome at Purdue. Obviously, they like to air it out, throw it around, given what they have on the roster. But it wouldn't be surprising if he's a future workhorse for the Boilermakers.
That's pretty good right there, Coach. All four of those guys, I think when you look at them, their play style really embodies the team that they're committed to in the program that they'll be playing their football on Saturdays, especially a guy like Mark Fletcher. I cannot wait to see him in Columbus on Saturday. So there you have a little roundup of Big Ten running back commits that we think have a bright future. A long list of those guys. I know it was hard for me and Andrew both. And Drew, Cole Cabana right there, 10.55 guy in the 100-meter, really dynamic guy. The way that Michigan is using these running backs, offensive coordinator Sharon Moore doing a really good job. So I expect Cole Cabana to have a very fruitful career in Ann Arbor and look forward to that as well. But Drew, Let's transition now to a topic that I think is really worthwhile in a lot of good discussion here. But we spend so much time, especially over the offseason, talking a lot about the state of Florida and the Sunshine State. And right now, those teams, each of those teams, the big three in the state of Florida, if you're not familiar, that is Florida, Florida State, and Miami. Each of those teams 4-3 on the year. And Drew, you had a pretty interesting stat right here that I'm going to use, if that's okay with you. 29-28 between those three programs dating back to last season. Only one college football playoff appearance between the three. Drew, big weekend for a couple of these programs in the Sunshine State. Florida falls flat to LSU. They lose that game at home by 10 points. Florida State plays Clemson. They lose that game by 6 points at home. Big weekend for both of those programs. Miami goes on the road and beats a down Virginia Tech team. But Drew, just your overall thoughts, and I know that's a very vague general question, but I guess I'll phrase it to you this way. Future outlook, Billy Napier, Mario Cristobal, both in year one, Mike Norvell now in year three. Your confidence level in these programs going forward?
Oh, I mean, think about it. What got my mind churning is not too long ago. I mean, the national title conversation, national title picture, it went through the big three in Florida, but we're so far removed from that. And Cooper, you mentioned it. The big three in the Sunshine State, they have one collective appearance in the college football playoff, and that was Florida State back in 2014. I guess what I'm wondering is, who's going to make the breakthrough? How long until it takes one of these schools to rise to the top? Because it seems every offseason, these fan bases buy into it being that year, or we're 1 or 2 years away. Well, right now, all three programs have 3 losses, and they don't look great. And I think with Florida State and Florida over the weekend, they both welcomed college football playoff winners to town in nationally televised games. Both of them, according to the Vegas odds, they had a chance. I mean, they were short spreads, less than 7 points, and really they got throttled. And what's kind of alarming, I think, is you had huge recruit sections that were loaded with elite talent and potential difference makers. And right now, when we look at the recruiting rankings, Florida, Florida State, Miami, they all have top 20 recruiting classes. But you start to wonder, are they going to be able to hold on to these classes? I think so. But what is these average 7-5, 6-6 seasons? What does that mean when it comes to the 2024s and the 2025s, that next wave of recruits? I think kids are looking for reasons to go to these schools, but when you go out and you lose these games and games where you hope to be competitive, I think that just hurts. I look at that elite group of juniors right now, your Jeremiah Smiths, your Josiah Traders, those guys are going to gravitate towards programs that are winning. And right now, the Sunshine State's big three isn't. And what does that mean? I don't know. Obviously, it's still early on for Billy Napier. It's still early on for Mario Cristobal, but there's reason to be a bit down on the Sunshine State's big three, 2 months into the college football season.
Well, I think there's a big opportunity for the first program to get it right on the field. And you mentioned recruiting and obviously how talented the state of Florida is. And you have programs like Georgia and Alabama who continue to have a high level of success in the state of Florida. I think the first program to show that they are taking steps, true progress in the right directions. And I think we've seen that, glimpses from each of the three. I think Florida State is an improved team, even though they've lost their last 3 games. I think in Tallahassee, you have to ask the question right now. Mike Norvell is 12-15. Willie Taggart was 9-12 when he got fired into his 3rd season in Tallahassee. That's the same winning percentage. Are you seeing enough progress on the field and on the recruiting trail that makes you feel confident in what Mike Norvell's future is in Tallahassee? I wrote an article a couple weeks ago on Coop's Corner talking about right now is the time to take advantage and seize the momentum for Florida State. Over the last 3 weeks, they have not done that. They are 0-3. And what has happened, now you leave the door open for programs like Florida in Miami, if they can find their footing, to find a way to get ahead of you in the race. I think Billy Napier, to me, is a guy that is building his program and kind of knows and understands that this is going to be a process. I also understand that there should be some level of frustration right now in the level of play especially last week, where I thought that was really a 50-50 game coming into it. And I thought they had the better playmaker at the quarterback position. Jaden Daniels really outshined Anthony Richardson in that game. So I like what each of these programs is doing on the recruiting trail. And I think in Coral Gables, in Miami, the question is not about talent acquisition. I come on this show every week and I say the same thing. It's never going to be about talent for Mario Cristobal. To me, I want to know as a Miami fan, hey, are we putting our players in the best position to succeed? And to me, that's the biggest question. That remains the biggest question in Miami. Don't spoil your talent. Don't make the game harder than it is. I think Mario Cristobal is one of the best recruiters in all of college football. He needs to learn to take a step back, put his coaches in the best position to coach, develop, and have his guys go out there, not think and execute at a high level. So I think all three of these programs right now are on different pathways. And I think there are a lot of different questions. I think Miami and Florida are relatively similar, just being in year one. But Drew, I want to get your feel on Tallahassee. We talk a lot about Florida State and Mike Norvell, and you see some of the feedback right now. Some people are willing to be patient. Some people say, hey, I don't know if this is it. And I think that's fair to question. Year three into the tenure, Mike Norvell is 3 games below 500.
It's fair for sure. They got a bye week coming up. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season goes. It feels like with Mike Norvell and FSU, there's a lot of ebbs and flows. It's ups and downs, pits and valleys. And right now they're on a downslope. But he has shown in the past that he can rally the troops and get people back on track, and I think he's going to need to do that. I don't know about the hot seat. I don't think me and you want to go down that road anymore, Cooper, but he's done very well on the recruiting trail. We'll see how they can finish. Again, they had a great group of talent there, and I think you look to the 2024 group. Luke Kromenhoek, the quarterback they got committed out of Georgia, they believe in him, and they think he is the arm of the future. So interesting to see. I think both those rivalry games for Mike Norvell are going to be super important. Remember, they traveled down and faced Miami, and then they're going to host Florida Thanksgiving weekend. Those 2 games could be crucial to his future and tenure.
Big to say the least. But Drew, let's get to another first-year head coach and a guy we've spent a lot of time talking about, but that's Marcus Freeman right now. It seemed like Notre Dame had righted the ship after a loss to Marshall, and obviously they had that opening week loss to Ohio State on the road, which was somewhat expected. They take a step back this weekend, and that's kind of what it seemed like. 1 step forward, 2 steps back for Notre Dame since Marcus Freeman has been the head coach in terms of the on-field results. And Drew, a disappointing result this weekend. They lose to Stanford. Stanford and Marshall, 2-0 against Notre Dame, combined 0-7 against all other FBS teams this season. I think when you look at that statistic, it's a little alarming if you're a Notre Dame fan. But Drew, one of the best classes in all of college football in 2023. They're off to a blazing start in 2024. The conversation around Notre Dame's recruiting class has been around the quarterback position. Can they get that right? And you look at the position that they're in right now with Tyler Buckner out for the season, Drew Pine taking responsibility there, and now Notre Dame finding themselves in a position with a little bit more adversity, even as talented as the group that Marcus Freeman is going to usher in here next year. Are there still some question marks in your mind when it comes to offense coordinator Tommy Rees, the fit there, and the quarterback position as well?
Coop, I mean, let's play out this scenario right now. Notre Dame, they can realistically go 6-6. They still got to travel to Syracuse, who's undefeated. They got Clemson at home, who's looks like the Clemson of old, and then they got to travel to USC. Do we think they're going to be able to score with Lincoln Riley in that offense? I think if Marcus Freeman goes 6-6 year one, he's going to be forced to make some type of change, and I think the one change might make the most sense is at the offensive coordinator position with Tommy Rees. I always thought that was an awkward marriage from the jump. I don't know if Marcus Freeman could go back, that's the guy he would pick. I mean, hey, we'll see how this season plays out. But if it's 6-6, he's going to have to pull the plug on something and buy himself some time. And if Rees were to leave, to me, the big question becomes what happens with CJ Carr, Notre Dame's prize quarterback commit in the class of 2024. He's a Michigan legacy. There's been talk of him potentially reclassifying to the class of 2023 because Notre Dame doesn't have a quarterback then. I think that's a fascinating storyline to follow. What happens with Tommy Rees? If Rees leaves, what happens with CJ Carr? Because right now that seems to be the signal caller of the future for the Irish. I'm all on board with that. I think there's some Davis Mills in this kid's game. He's very accurate with the football. Love his mechanics and what he does. But that's what I want to know about Notre Dame. What changes are made at the top, and how does that impact what might be the most important commit they have right now in CJ Carr?
I love CJ Carr. That being said, the expectation that he's going to come in and be the answer to all of Marcus Freeman's problems, I think has to make you a little bit concerned. I look at this 2023 class for Marcus Freeman, and I love the class. I love what he's put together. I think it's got excellent depth, but there's no quarterback. And right now, Tyler Buckner, Drew Pine, whoever you want to say, I don't know if either of those two are providing you what you need to be a legitimate playoff contender. And in a cycle where they were in on arguably one of the best arms in the country on Dante Moore, Christopher Vazina as well, Avery Johnson at one time, to come up with none of those guys right now, I think is going to be the story, unfortunately, for Notre Dame's class. That is the one position historically that has held this program back. That has to be the biggest emphasis. And you can talk about the issues on the field for Notre Dame offensively. To me, when I think of Tommy Rees, that's what I got circled. I'm looking at the quarterback position and saying, what are we doing here? That's where you have to get that right. That's the biggest need. And like I said, I love CJ Carr, but if CJ Carr doesn't reclassify, and even if he does, those are a lot of expectations you're putting on a guy that's supposed to be a senior in high school. So I think Notre Dame, listen, they have to have a plan coming into the offseason, knowing that they have to get better at that position. If I were them, I'd be looking at the transfer market, looking to be active there, and at least add some competition to find a way to upgrade that roster, because that roster has the makings of being a good team. And what they have coming in, I think Notre Dame is going to have some foundational pieces. But right now, to me, they got to get the quarterback position figured out. And Marcus Freeman and his offense coordinator, they got to get on the same page. So Notre Dame is as good as life is on the recruiting trail, Drew. If you don't have a quarterback, it doesn't matter. So I think we've learned that. A lot of other teams kind of showing that this year. So before we get to one of our last segments, like I said, make sure to subscribe to the 247 Sports YouTube channel. We appreciate you guys joining in with us as always. Drew, one of our favorite segments now, I think we've done this the last couple of weeks, but some of the freshman standouts, and I think the guys making the biggest impact across the country. There was a guy from the state of Florida that I think, Drew, kind of surprised you with the level of production that he's had in the Big Ten so far at Illinois, playing for Brett Bielema. Tell us what you think with your first pick here.
Yeah, Gabe Jacas, I was watching the Illinois-Minnesota game. You had heard and seen, and we're seeing it right here, this big sack he had on a third down. I mean, he is graded out, according to PFF, as one of the top true freshmen in the country. And he's someone that I had a chance to see play on Friday nights. He's at Fort Pierce Central High School, converted offensive lineman. But the thing that stands out about Gabe and his profile is the fact that he was a two-time state champion wrestler. We always talk about wrestling and multi-sport background and how that applies to it. He's a guy that knows how to use his hands, knows how to shift his weight, knows how to win with leverage. So it's nice to see him, making plays. And he's a guy that I'm probably going to wish we had higher in the rankings. He's someone that watched the senior tape, wanted to move him up, but it was like, why is Illinois the only one that's on him? And I think Brett Bielema and his staff made a very, very good evaluation and one of the lighter recruited parts of the Sunshine State. So tip of the cap to them. Excited for Gabe's future.
It shows you how deep the state is. And for us, this segment, I think we like to use it as a segment to kind of say, okay, self-scouting report for us. Who are some guys that maybe we got a little bit too in the weeds on? And Drew, I know you just gave your pick. I'm going to go with Quinshawn Junkins out of the state of Alabama, a guy that there was a lot of conversation about coming out of high school, a guy that we did a lot of extensive homework on. And the biggest question mark for me coming out was the top end speed. I can tell you right now, That was a mistake. This guy has been a bona fide dude for Lane Kiffin from day one in Oxford. Top 12 in the country in rushing, and that's in a backfield with Zach Evans, a former 5-star recruit. The job that he's done, the patience, the vision, his feel for the game at the position, the contact balance, he is a perfect fit for what Lane Kiffin wants to do in that offense. And I can tell you right now, we had him as a number 87 overall in terms of the grade, a 3-star grade. That was a mistake. So Quinshaw Junkins, I apologize to you, my friend. Congratulations on your early success, and I look forward to him keeping that up. But Drew, you got another guy from the state of Florida, ironically enough. And Drew, we really like this guy. He's super versatile defensive back out of American Heritage who just seems to breed defensive backs. But that is Jacoby Spells out of West Virginia.
Yeah, I can't remember which fan base at some point during last cycle gave us a bunch of junk for having this kid in the top 247. Well, he's at West Virginia. He's playing as a true freshman, and he's making big-time plays. He had a pick six to seal a game a few weeks ago. And then this past Thursday in the win over Baylor, he really sparked that come-from-behind victory. You see him right there returning a blocked extra point for 2 points. He also recovered a fumble in the game. And I always say, Cooper, if you're going to bet on a defensive back, bet on one from American Heritage Plantation, because normally they pan out. Tyson Campbell, Pat Surtain, Jacoby Spells, the latest one that's getting it done on Saturdays or Thursdays or whatever night of the week that he is playing. No, this is a kid we liked. We liked his profile. We liked how he moved, sub 11 in the 100-meter dash, and he's a former wide receiver, so he has ball skills from being on that side of the ball. He checked off a ton of our boxes. Not surprised that he's out there making plays for the Mountaineers.
Yeah, tough, physical dude, versatile. You mentioned the sub 1100 meter. He was just a football player. That's what stuck out the most. I loved the fit of him going up to Morgantown, playing in West Virginia, having the ability to play early there, and you've already seen the production as well. Drew, I'm going to go out west, and I'm going to go to a guy that was very highly debated on the West Coast. That is Tetairoa McMillan, the guy they call T-Mac, and wow, did he have a game this weekend against Washington. 7 receptions for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. Arizona lost in a shootout on the road in Seattle, 39-49, but the future is bright there. I really love some of the pieces that Jed Fish is adding to his offense. You see Arizona more competitive in these games that they haven't been in the past. I think this guy has such a bright future. The conversation surrounding him was more on the top end speed as well. That's kind of why he ended up outside of the top 32. Some of the comparisons there were a J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who played his ball at Stanford. So I love the potential there at the position for T-Mac, and I think is a guy that's going to continue to turn heads. He's very well polished. We're seeing that right now with his ability to make plays early in Arizona. But Drew, you're going to end. Guess what? I think he just went 3 for 3 in the state of Florida. What a surprise there. But Nigel Kelly, and I know Miami Hurricanes fans are really excited about this dude.
Oh, I want to point out with T-Mac, he's got a volleyball background. You can't leave that out when you're scouting Mr. T-Mac. No, Nigel Kelly. And really, Miami played a ton of true freshmen in that win at Virginia Tech. We saw my guy, Ja'Curry Brown, the quarterback. He get in there for a few Wildcat packages. Jaleel Skinner, the former top 247 tight end, he caught a pair of passes. I remember when people said he couldn't catch. But Nigel Kelly, I think this is a guy that you're going to hear his name and see him be more part of the rotation as the season progresses. He's got 2 sacks. He had half a sack this past weekend in that win on the road, and he's only getting about 20 snaps a game, but he's everything, Cooper, that I think we thought he would be in terms of providing that burst and that presence off the edge, Nigel Leak. So he's trending in the right direction, which is always encouraging. And when Mario Cristobal took over and replaced Manny Diaz, I mean, Nigel Leak was the first kid he saw out on the road that night. He was that much of a priority. And I'll maintain this. I've always said if Mario had stayed at Oregon, I think Nigel Leak would have ended up in Eugene. So nice get. And I think he's someone that you're going to be hearing more and more about as the season progresses.
Oyster Boyz keep receipts. Don't get feisty with Drew right now. Who reminds you what you missed on. But Drew, the last guy I got here, a guy that we were really high on throughout the process, Antonio Williams. And I got to be honest, I'm a little surprised with the level of production that he's had so early at Clemson, the receiver from the state of South Carolina. But a big game this past weekend in Tallahassee where they needed him. Drew 2 receptions, 76 yards, and a tutty for Antonio Williams. This is a guy that just plays the game the right way. He can play inside out. He is very sudden, one of the most natural route runners in last year's cycle. I think a guy that not only is oozing with physical talent, he plays the game the right way, understands leverage, understands how to attack it, and understands how to get open. A very dependable receiver, and I think a guy that's going to be a very friendly target for Cade Klubnik in the future. We're already seeing that right now with DJU. So there you have it, the freshman impact this season, certainly a segment that we are enjoying. We will be doing more of that on Mondays going forward. But, Drew, we're going to wrap up with a 2-minute drill here. And, it's kind of funny. We just got done talking about this guy. Drew and I had a segment that we had to do for CBS HQ before we jumped on here. And I think me and you have had this conversation before. But, Drew, one of our favorite players in this cycle, and I think he's as complete as they come. But that is top 247 running back Justice Haynes out of the state of Georgia, playing at Buford High School, currently committed to the University of Alabama. And why this is relevant and what Drew's going to hit on it in a minute. He is the number 4 ranked running back in the top 247, only behind Richard Young out of the state of Florida, who's the number 3 ranked running back in the country. They are both going to play their football on Saturdays for Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa. But, Drew, you think Justice Haynes got a pretty solid case on moving up in the rankings?
I do, and Coop, I mentioned it. Couldn't get out on the road on Friday, so I tried to stream as many games as I could, and one of them was that Buford Mill Creek contest. 11,000 people in the stands. You had Kirby Smart was there, Ryan Day was there. It was kind of a who's who on the sidelines, and I thought Justice Haynes stole the show. 20 carries for 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, also threw a 25-yard pass. And what's really notable about his outing is he now has 7,000 career rushing yards. He's only the 6th running back in Peach State history to do that. I have had a ton of exposure to Richard Young, our number 3 running back in the class of 2023, and now I've gotten more exposure to him, and I think he's a guy, Justice Haynes, that we move up in the rankings. I think that gap between the 3 and the 4 is super tight. We still like Ruben Owens number 1. We like Cedric Baxter number 2, but would not be surprised if we get into these rankings meetings before things go final in February and we see Justice Haynes jump over Richard Young. Remember, this is a guy that made my freaks list, 93 miles per hour on the mound. He's got elite core strength, a bit of a workout warrior, UGA legacy, but he's headed to Georgia. So something to keep an eye on, that race for RB3 in the class of 2023.
I think when you're trying to decide between these guys, they're all immensely physically gifted. But when you look at a running back like Justice Haynes, really outside of a guy like Cedric Baxter, I mean, he's one of the most complete backs in the cycle. A 3-down running back can play in between the tackles. Like I said, has great contact balance, patience, vision in between the tackles, but it's his ability as a receiver as well. I really love him in the screen game, and I really like his ability as a 3rd down back in pass protection as well. So plus he gives you some value in the return game. So I think this is going to be a guy, Drew, regardless of where we end up slotting these guys, it's going to be a guy that's going to make an impact very early for Alabama and Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa. Drew, I'm going to go up to the Big Ten about a team that we should be talking about more. We just haven't. And a lot of that is due to our show. We talk about recruiting. And one of the best teams in the country, that is the University of Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. Right now, they are ranked outside of the top 25, the number 27 ranked team per 247 Sports composite team rankings. And when you look at Michigan, you start to kind of scratch your head a little bit. Only 14 commits. This could end up being a smaller class for Michigan. They're still in on the number 1 athlete in the country in a guy like Nicholas Harbor, and they're sitting in a good position there, but only 2 players in the top 247 currently. Ohio State, for reference, has 12, right? And to me, that is always the team that you're going to be compared to. And although Michigan is one of the most complete teams in college football right now, and you have a guy and a difference maker like J.J. McCarthy, Drew, I start to wonder, is Michigan leaving some food on the table. They've finished strong in the past. I do think they are one of the better evaluating programs in the country. So I do give them some benefit there. I would just like to see this team live up to their recruiting potential. I've worked at Michigan before. They have so much to sell there. One of the best public university in the country, one of the best business schools in the country, if not the best. The resources that you're going to have access to at the University of Michigan. And on top of that, one of the most historic programs in the country. For you to be ranked number 27, whether you were sitting at 4-3 or whether you're sitting at 7-0, right now would be a little bit of a head scratcher to me. They should be a top 10 perennial recruiting program year in and year out. And that being said, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt until this becomes an issue, because right now it isn't. But I do wonder, hey, are there more opportunities out there for Michigan to be taken advantage of?
I agree, Cooper. Hey, but they're in it for Nicholas Harbor. He's hanging around out there. Edwin Joseph, the late riser out of Chaminade Madonna Prep. I think he's going to visit in a few weeks. But no, I think you bring up a great point. I mean, Michigan 7-0, awesome win over Penn State. Why aren't they higher in the rankings? And we talked about this when we were in Nashville. They should be higher up in there. So interested to see if Jim Harbaugh can get that thing going there for Big Blue.
The boys are really pushing the limits here. 51 minutes into this show. A lot to talk about. And Drew, I get the sense that we're talking a little bit more because we're getting a little bit closer to early National Signing Day, which the Oyster Boyz will have you cover. We will be all over that. We're looking forward to that. And if you like to nerd out and if you like recruiting, this is a show for you. So, guys, we appreciate you stopping by. And for Andrew Ivins, I am Cooper Petagna. I will be out across the pond in Germany covering an event for 247 Sports on Wednesday. So Drew's going to have us covered on Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern. But until next time, we'll see you then.